Nancy Creed, president of the Springfield Regional Chamber, and I am joined this morning with Dexter Johnson, the president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Springfield. Good morning, Dexter, and thanks so much for joining me with coffee.
Good morning, Nancy. Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Nice to see you. So I think the last time we saw each other was when you were opening the fitness center and the learning space over at Tower Square, which was just a couple of months before the pandemic hit. So tell me what the YMCA has been doing.
Correct. So we have, the pandemic caught us off guard as it did everyone. And so the YMCA was shut down in March, just as most businesses were. However, we did decide to do emergency childcare because we knew there was a crucial need for those folks, first responders, people working at hospitals and things like that. So we reopened our child care center a couple of weeks after the shutdown, and it was great to be able to serve that community through that state program that really allowed those folks to be able to go to work and know that their children were in a safe environment. So we stayed open through the really hot part of the pandemic, and then at the beginning of July, we reopened our child care center to the remainder of the parents that we had prior, as well as our fitness center opened later in July. So we've been fully operational, although lots of new restrictions and things like that based on the state guidelines, but it's been great to be open and serving the community again.
Now, childcare actually has been a critical issue for the employer community throughout all of this. So you have literally been serving that gap. Do you see that moving forward? Will you expand on that, or what are your thoughts?
So the emergency childcare program ended, but when our licenses were renewed and we reopened permanently, we do have lots of opportunities for childcare options, everything from toddlers up through sixth grade. So it's great to be able to serve that full group in our Springfield location as well as our Wilbraham location.
And kids are so resilient. What any moment stand out for you when watching these kids kind of come back together?
Well, the coming back together was different. So with preschool, that was more normal, and so it was, besides wearing masks, it was a relatively normal environment for them. But serving Springfield, especially Springfield Public Schools, did not go back to in-person options at all until recently, and so our service had to change, and we became a remote learning site so that parents that did have to work but their children needed to do remote learning, were able to still bring them to the center and offer that opportunity. So, but that's different. That was, of course, a challenge for even the kids here that have a great environment to do it in. You're used to being in class, and now you're looking at a computer screen, and you're in a room with kids looking at other computer screens. And so dealing with all of that was very different for our staff and very different for the children. I think some kids have excelled being in a remote learning environment, and other kids that really like that social interaction and that ability to be face to face had different challenges that we had to address. So it really has created a year like no other.
And you are very familiar with pivoting and adjusting. So you joined, you became the CEO. I think you were interim. You had some leadership changes. Then you became the actual president and CEO. You faced some fiscal challenges. You had to you chose to move your headquarters. So talk to me about all of that, because that is a lot to deal with, and then throw the pandemic on top of it.
Yes. So yes, we have undergone significant transition over the last decade or so here at the YMCA, and but I think we've come out in pretty good shape. The move has done what it was intended to do, and kind of consolidate our operations a little bit, as well as being able to give a great new facility on the health and wellness side, and as well as the child care side of what we do. and really put us in a better place financially to be able to move forward, to take a look. Okay, what's the long-term picture for Springfield? Will there be another standalone YMCA in our future, and to really take a look at those options. But we needed to stabilize the organization first, and so that has happened. But pivoting is really what the YMCA is all about. It's the part that I love about the Y, is that we're not stuck in any one bucket. The YMCA can adapt to serve the community as needed. YMCA's in different cities, different places have different roles and functions to meet those needs. And so, while the YMCA at this time, has a very strong health and wellness component, and has a strong childcare component, and that's what most people think of now when they hear the Y. But if you go back 30 years, that wasn't the case. And everyone knows the YMCA song, which the Y had no part in producing, but um, we definitely, where it was a residential environment and only for
Mhm.
young men at the time. And so, when the Y began, it was a Bible study program for young men, and hence our name of being the Young Men's Christian Association. And it's been for railroad workers and been for soldiers at times of war, and so the Y is adapted to become lots of things over the years. And that remains the great part about it, is we don't have to fit into any cookie cutter idea of what the Y is supposed to be. The community that you're in and those needs determine what the Y will be.
Well, you know that it's kind of easy for a leader to say those things, and that's what we do well, is adjust. But it's not easy to lead your people through change. We are all human beings and creatures of habit, and change is hard. So, what leadership skills have you kind of had to rely on to bring not only your people, but the community with you?
hmm Definitely. Well, one is, I think, the leadership skill of collaboration. The Y is one of a number of great not-for-profits in the region, as well as working with the business community. The for-profit business community has also been a great partner. So, really being able to communicate effectively to those partners and understand that regardless of what our location is and what changes happen, that the Y is here for this purpose. And so that's been really a key one for us. And I think the ability to influence, with when it's your staff. Okay, well, there's some control there because it's your staff. But when you need to convince a member or a community partner or a family that needs your care, that this will be a good move for us, for them. That takes some ability to convince people that you don't have direct control over. So I think the ability to influence is crucial.
And you mentioned the business community and your community partners. A lot of nonprofits have been struggling in their fundraising capacity
Mhm.
during this pandemic. How has that impacted the Y?
It's caused changes, but overall the changes have been relatively positive. I know a lot of funders turn to having a COVID focus in their funding, and so if we were an organization that where we weren't doing a lot to deal with COVID, then I would say there would have been significant challenges. But because, again, the needs that we're providing, childcare needs especially, and so with summer camp coming up and things like that, that our business is still COVID related, while it's not as direct as the medical community might be, and what some of those needs are. It's childcare is a crucial infrastructure
Mhm.
that all businesses need, and so there's that realization, and I think that benefits us to be able to really be playing in that field. And so the fundraising part has continued to go well, just kind of changes of direction as to what the funding is paying for.
And you call yourself a Y guy. What does that mean?
Well, I'm going on year 29 of working for the YMCA. So I am not originally from this area. So I've been here going on 8 years, but I've the Y is the only adult job that I've known, other than I have also done some adjunct work at Springfield College, but that is where I've spent my career. And I grew up not knowing about the Y. I knew about the Y from the song too, and wasn't. I was a military kid, and we kind of had our own things on the military base for youth development and sports opportunities and things like that. So my first time walking in a Y was when I walked in to apply for a job. I was going to be an elementary school teacher. That's what I was in school to do at the time, and 29 years later, I never made it to that elementary classroom because of, really falling in love with the way that the Y serves the community.
Was there one thing that you really just fell in love that drew you to it and said, this is my life's passion?
I think and again, coming up in the youth development side, and it was after school programs and working at summer camp. And then my first director job was in that field. And so it still gave me the great satisfaction of working with young people, which is why I wanted to be a teacher in the first place. But I was just drawn to that creativity that it allows. So with school systems, understandably, there's a curriculum. You need to follow it. You need to make sure that you're staying as close to the line as possible, so that that there are some structures in place. With the Y, that ability to, hey, I just thought of a new program and we should try it. Let's just do it. And what you have that flexibility with the Y that I really enjoyed. And then the ability that once I moved into the other side, the health and wellness side of the Y, and then realized, well, this is really great because I can spend the morning having coffee with the senior citizens that sit around the tables, just kind of socializing at the Y, and then go in the afternoon and talk to the kids in the preschool and get just a whole other feel of what the Y does. So that flexibility, that variety was kind of what made me decide I'm going to continue doing this rather than going into teaching once I finally finished school.
And you mentioned that you are not from around here. I know you are from Florida. I was reading an article that you were born in Key West. I had no idea. It is my favorite place on the planet.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And how long did you live there, and where'd you go after that?
Sure. So I was born in Key West, but I moved. Father was in the military, as I mentioned, so transferred to Tampa, the Air Force Base in Tampa, when I was 3 or 4 years old. And so I spent every summer in Key West, though, with the grandparents, and just kind of hung out there all summer. Just probably 2 blocks from the southernmost point, which I'm sure you have
Hmm.
visited, into Key West. My grandparents' house was only a couple blocks from there, and so but I spent my life in Tampa after that. So until moving here 8 years ago, I was in Tampa all of that time. So 16 years with the Y there, and then I worked 5 years with YUSA, which is our national organization that is in Chicago, but I didn't have to move to Chicago. I still served the South as a part of my region. So I still remained in Tampa until the move to become a New Englander.
And is there something different about working for the local Y versus the national organization?
Definitely significantly different. That was primarily a remote job. So now we've all gotten used to remote. I think a lot more people over this last year of what it means to work remotely. But at the time, that was new and different, and you miss some of that immediate satisfaction, as I mentioned, of seeing the kids and seeing your members. But my role then was to work with staff and help in leadership development. So that was the department I was a part of. But working for the national office really opened my eyes. Tampa is a larger Y, large
Hmm.
association. I think we had 10 branches when I left. So
Wow.
it's a significant size organization. And so you tend to think, well, that's what the Y is, then that's what I'm in the middle of. So that's what the Y is. But when I went to work for the national office, the realization that, well, that's not normally what the Y is. There are a lot more small Ys than there are large associations. And so, Springfield is kind of more in the middle. Wouldn't be called even a small Y. Lots of Ys may be, like the Holyoke Y, which is just one Y. Westfield, Greater Westfield YMCA is one organization, and most of the Ys around the country, if you added them up, are going to fall more into that category where there's not as much infrastructure and things like that. And so working for the national office gave me a different perspective on just the diversity in YMCA's around the country.
And has there ever been anyone over the years that you've really drawn your inspiration from?
Absolutely, a variety of people. One person in particular, I met her when I was working for the Tampa Y. She was just starting with the national office, and they were going around the country really trying to figure out what the next step was from a diversity and inclusion perspective for the YMCA, and really wanted to address the fact that women, people of color were very underrepresented at the upper levels of the organization. In your C-suite environment, those groups were underrepresented. And so the Y nationally made a commitment to address that. So despite the fact that throughout the ranks of the organization, the numbers seemed great and everything seemed to be in great balance. And, there were more women working for the Y than there were men. But when you look at the 800 plus organizations around the country of YMCA associations, why were there 20 women CEOs out of 800
Mhm.
when they make up more than half of the population of the Y? And similar poor numbers as it related to people of color. And so when I met Carolyn Krager, she was just fact finding in that role, and then she initiated a significant number of programs to really address the issue. And so just watching her and looking at the respect that she garnered over that time, and the way that she really cared about the work she did and the people that she was doing it for, that's always been an inspiration for me. When there are CEOs, James Morton, who used to be here in Springfield, is now the CEO in Boston, and David Brown, who's the CEO in Albany. And so you have these well-established leaders of huge YMCA's, and Carolyn's mom to us. There's that level of respect that she garners from everyone that she's been able to impact.
And what advice would you give the next generation of Y leaders?
The biggest one I would say would be to make sure that you use your resources. There are oftentimes a lot of resources out there that we're just not aware of because they may not be right there in our face, or if we're with a smaller organization, they might not be within your organization. But there are not a lot of new things. COVID was new, but there are not a lot of things that haven't happened before somewhere, that someone's had the experience of going through. And so, for example, when we were considering making the move, well, there are lots of Ys that have made similar moves. So it was a matter of finding out who those people were that led the Y through those processes and having those conversations. When you're a leader of an organization, of a department, sometimes that can feel a little lonely because there aren't necessarily always going to be your peers standing next to you. You may not be an equal part of a team, especially if you're a leader of an organization, but there are other organizations And so, build your network so that you have people that you can go to that have had those experiences and can help you along those paths. So, the names I mentioned with James Morton, although I've been with the Y longer than he has,
Yeah.
he Springfield is his area. He knows this area, and so he's someone that I call and ask for thoughts and advice on certain things.
You're right. It is lonely at the top. So we all need to lean on each other. So what's next for the Y?
We'll be next year. Well, immediately next is hopefully just continuing to regroup post COVID as we move to a post COVID environment. And, after the state is announced the August 1st, most of the regulations and the restrictions will be lifted at that point. And so we're hoping that people start to feel more comfortable as more and more get vaccinated with coming back to the Y, and people that are working remotely will start to get back into offices, and the need for childcare increases. So our immediate future is for the rest of this year is to focus on growing back to where we were pre-COVID. But longer term, I think next year we'll be going into a strategic planning process to really make that determination. What's the future of the Y? Is it staying in these two, youth development and health and wellness categories in the way that we are now? Is there another area that we want to focus on? Is there a future of a standalone Y somewhere in Springfield? And just taking a look at, down the line, what do the next 5, 6 years hold for us as a part of that strategic plan?
And what do the next 5, 6 years hold for Dexter Johnson?
Well, for me, it's really all about continuing to grow. I mentioned my time working with leadership development, so that was the other part of the Y that I was really attracted to. That they have their own system of development and courses you can take to improve your leadership skills and your fiscal skills and communication skills and all of those good things that are important for someone to progress in their careers. And so for me, really being able to continue to have personal growth in that way, but I'd love to, now that we're settling in once again, to make sure that the staff here and throughout the Commonwealth have an opportunity to develop in that way that I was developed early in my career, and to realize that the Y can be a career. It's not just a stepping stone to another career, but to really just infuse that element of growth throughout the organization is something that I definitely want to get accomplished over the next couple of years here.
Well, good luck to you. And thank you so much for joining me for coffee. I very much appreciate it. And it was so nice to see you because it's been over a year since we've seen each other. So it's nice. And I hope we actually see each other in person very soon.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks so much, Dexter. Have a great day.
Thank you.